Hello, everyone, and welcome to Illinois Talks Esports. This is our first Overwatch episode, coming in right after Grand Finals. We just had Grand Finals on, I believe it was Saturday, or no, Friday actually, Friday, and it was pretty good. So there's a lot of stuff that we want to talk about. Playoffs itself, Grand Finals, along with a lot of other new stuff that had come out, just like the new hero information. So we got quite a packed episode today, and I'm sure that there's a lot to discuss. So, first topic is going to be playoffs itself. Um, Now, Aiden, let me first introduce you before we go into this. Aiden is currently the captain of the Overwatch team. He's been playing on the team for 3 years now, or is it 2 years?
This is my third year.
Third year now, right? And then you were originally a tank player, but you're more flex now.
Yeah,
Correct?
whatever
Yeah,
we need these days.
yeah, yeah. That happens within Overwatch. So Aiden been on the team for a long time, been in the scene for a long time as well. So great to have you on the show.
Happy to be here.
All right, so let's talk about these playoffs. So we had quite an interesting playoffs. I think in the end, the two teams that were kind of expected to make it were the ones that did end up making it. But the path through to the grand finals was actually kind of insane, especially because San Francisco going down to the lower bracket early on.
Yeah.
Yeah, but let's go through all the teams on their own and just give our own thoughts on basically what we thought of their run throughout the entire season. So first, let's start off with a big one, right? London. So I don't know. Give me your thoughts on London. What did you think was going to happen going into the season, and then what do you think as the season ended?
Well, I'll be honest. I didn't think they would get as far as they did, personally.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like they just haven't been that relevant since season one, so
Mhm.
I wasn't expecting much out of them this year, but they made it farther than I was expecting, so kind of
Yeah.
surprised there.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, a lot of people going into this roster, or going into the season, kind of looked at this roster, and were kind of worried. They were like, "Oh, it's a bunch of contenders players from EU, right? Generally, in the past, that has had mixed results, and people weren't too confident on that. But I think this roster really surprised, and I think Hadi especially, because a lot of people
Hmm.
were really low on Hadi at the start of the season, but he really proved himself. I think a lot of it probably had to do with the fact that Overwatch 2, brand new game, the tank role itself has changed massively, and I think that fit Hadi really well. So it was good to see. It was a really good storyline, to kind of see London kind of just go from zero to hero, and there was that whole stuff with Atlanta in the middle of the season too, where like there was
Hmm.
some trash talking going on, and they kind of put Atlanta in their place. So that was fun. To be fair, when is Atlanta not trash talking? So
That's true. That's true.
yeah,
If only they could back it up, but
yeah,
unfortunately they can't and
yep,
never have been.
yeah. Now let's talk about Philly. So actually, before we move on to Philly, are your thoughts on London going into next year? Do you think that they need any changes? Anything that kind of sticks out to you in terms of what kind of pushes them over the edge for next season?
That's a really good question. I think on one hand, I would say keep the core roster the same, just so you can build off what they have already. But
Mm-hmm.
on the other, because most of them are newer guys, younger guys there that who maybe just need some more time to adjust to the like Overwatch League level. But at the same time, maybe they could benefit from new players.
Yeah,
It's hard to say.
yeah. I think overall, they did it pretty well. Christopher as a coach kind of really made this roster shine. It's kind
Mhm.
of hard to say, whether or not it's something that maybe they need to replace some pieces, or maybe they just need to run it back. Christopher having even more time now, maybe he can polish up the current players even more. Um, in which case would be fantastic. But I think if they are able to get some upgrades, it really depends on what their plan is for next year. Do they still want to stay with only European players, or do they want to branch out to Korean or North American as well? But if
Mm-hmm.
they do stay with Korean, the options are very limited. And I think currently this roster is the best European roster that they can get at the moment. So, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Now moving on to the next team in the playoffs, Philadelphia. So I'm gonna be honest, Philadelphia is an APAC team, and I watched a little bit of APAC, but I don't have that much information on it. But I mean,
Yeah.
um, I don't know. Do you have like any particular thoughts on this team?
Not really, because similar to you, I don't really watch the side. I find it interesting that they're in this league at all with all of these Asian teams.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
I suppose they had to fill it somehow. But yeah, didn't really watch these guys too much. But from the looks of it, they were just average this year. So.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different things going into this team from what I understand. I mean, Philadelphia always has that thing where they look, from somewhere between really good to extremely amazing throughout the whole regular season, but then in the playoffs, they just fall short. But with um, season one being the most prime example where they fell short right at the grand finals. Um, but I think this year, there was a lot going into the season. Unfortunately, we had the loss of Alarm, so that probably
Mm-hmm.
impacted their run a lot, or their I guess the overall team. But it's interesting because I guess going to next year, um, they are losing a few players, right? Because Carpe is basically confirmed to be going to T1 Valorant. And
Mm-hmm.
even though Carpe didn't really get that much playtime, you kind of have to wonder what that means for the organization and I guess the other players because he was kind of the veteran presence on that team. Um, and I mean, he was kind of the face of that franchise as well. So I guess at this point, who do who becomes their franchise face and who are they putting their eggs in one basket for? I guess.
That's a really good question because as of right now, there isn't anyone else that truly stands out.
Mm-hmm.
Not really. That at least that could take his place. So they're gonna have to find someone to fill his spot, which will not be easy.
Yep. Yeah, and then I'm just gonna pull up the team pages while we're doing this, so that it makes it easier to just kind of look at the rosters. All right, so Philadelphia, right? Carpe Fury, Fury is great. MN3, great. Zest, I've heard amazing things about Zest. Don't know anything. Um, honestly, Aim God, don't know. Aim God has been pretty good, but I know he filled in last minute due to, the tragedy with Alarm, and then Belosteria. I have no clue about him. Same thing with Fixa. So honestly, I can't say too much about these APAC rosters, but it is interesting to see where this team goes next year because they're losing their, I guess they're like their franchise player. So I guess maybe they go all in on Zest because that's the talk of the town lately. So it'll be
Mm-hmm.
interesting.
Yeah, we'll have to see.
Yep.
Honestly, I have no idea. So
All right. Moving on to the next team. So we have the Shanghai Dragons, the champions for last year. Um,
yes,
yeah, and they kind of went out in a very weak fashion. So
they did.
yeah. So what do you think were the problems with this team?
Well, honestly, can't say much. Didn't really I didn't watch this game personally because I
Yeah,
missed the first day of the playoffs.
that's fair.
But from coming in as a returning champions team, they have a lot on their shoulders, and they kind of just collapsed in the playoffs. To be honest, a little
Mm-hmm.
disappointing because they kind of just rolled over and died, whereas many people thought they'd go much further.
Yeah, the it's kind of weird because it feels like with a lot of the APAC teams and in playoffs in general, it just felt like they were always behind NA in terms of the meta, and it
Mm-hmm.
kind of even though like the composition matchups were mirrors like almost 100% of the playoffs. It still felt like a lot of the like APAC teams, including Shanghai, just didn't fully understand how to play the composition. And
Mm-hmm.
even though the player quality was still super high, they're losing. They're losing out on players like Void, right? Because he has military service, um, and I think overall, one of the key things is it doesn't seem like their players are is not necessarily motivated, but as like um prominent or I don't know how to describe it, but it feels like the player's skill level is still at the very top, but it doesn't seem like they've gotten worse, but it seems like everyone around them has gotten better. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it almost just it's like Shanghai in the first round got destroyed by the Spark, and the Spark
Mm-hmm.
were an average team this year. Nobody was expecting them to get as far as they did, but they
Yep.
dominated for a good majority of these playoffs.
Yeah.
And somehow, and like Shanghai just couldn't figure out what they were doing, and it was a little odd watching that because I don't know, they just got outplayed.
Yeah. I mean, going into the Spark, they had a really good run in this playoffs. I think they were the only APAC team to properly understand the meta.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was really impressed with players like Alpha. Um, I didn't know much about him going into the playoffs because again, APAC, so didn't see too much of them. But seeing this guy and Shy, both of them, they really impressed, and I'm really excited to see what they do next year. I think they have a solid core, but it depends on how consistent they are. Because from what I know, Spark kind of um, they had really strong stages, and then they just looked non-existent in other times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was yeah. The Spark just they dominated their division, but
Yep.
as soon as they got to the West, it just didn't go as well.
Yep. Yeah. Now going into some of the more Western teams, right? We have Florida, not Florida Mayhem. Now
Uh,
I don't know if it's just me, but Florida surprised me this year overall. Not in these playoffs, but I kind of went into this season thinking that Florida would just be kind of a mid-table team and be just right outside of play-ins.
hmm
But that wasn't the case. They actually, they made play-ins and then they qualified into playoffs from that, and they performed pretty well. Well, what were your thoughts?
oh
Well, not in playoffs, but they performed pretty well in the season. Yeah.
yeah, just I don't recognize most of this roster, which just goes to show like how little these players are known. At least to me, the only one I really do is Hydron,
Hmm.
but the rest of them, they they stood out in a way that I wasn't expecting because I know like after these playoffs, I actually know some of these players and I will remember them
Yeah.
for a while. Now that said about the playoffs, while they did make it pretty far, they ended up just beating the same team twice.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much we can put on that because they did just beat the Rain twice. I don't,
Hmm.
which I'm not sure how that even happened, how that worked out in the bracket, but yeah, that's
Yeah.
my.
And I mean, we'll get to the rain in a second, but I think this team, it's kind of surprising because they signed someone like Exy in the middle of the season, and like almost never played him, which
hmm
is kind of crazy to think because he was a nuts player last year. He had to retire due to an injury, and he comes back and it doesn't even get play time. So I'm hoping that going into next year, he gets picked up by a team that does make use of him, or he does play on this roster. But I know there are some rumors about him potentially switching to Valorant, so who knows? But if he does stay in Overwatch, I think he definitely does deserve some playtime from
hmm
what we've seen from him in the past. It would be a shame otherwise. But I mean, I was really surprised by players like Sir Majed. I I hear they're signing a Saudi Arabian player. Um, I'm like, okay, how do they compare to the rest of the world? But he did pretty well. I mean, got all the way to the playoffs. I think as a flex support, he was pretty strong, and I'm excited to see more of him too. It's good to have more international representation in the league, just outside of the three major regions that we have right now.
Yeah, I agree, and I hope it continues in the future.
Yeah. Someone I think kind of popped off on Tank. I know that he had offers on other rosters, but eventually ended up sticking with the Mayhem, and I think it definitely worked out for him. And he's another prospect I'm excited for next year. Hydron looked nuts this year, but also that was mostly because of Sojourn meta. I I guess we'll talk about that later on, but I'm interested to see going to next year, hoping that Sojourn isn't meta. How that ends up
Agreed.
looking. Yeah.
In both Owl and the game.
Yeah. All right. Now we talked about Atlanta before. Um, Atlanta, they're kind of the villains of the Overwatch League. Not a lot of people really like that organization, but I don't know. They seem like they were strong at the start of the year, and then they fell off, um, like towards the second half, and then they were able to make it into playoffs. But I don't know. I really was not impressed by this team at all.
Nah,
Yeah,
neither was I.
yeah. I don't know. It's interesting because they so I think Kai and Nero are both really good DPS players. I think
Mm-hmm.
Hawk is a good tank player as well. But at the start of the season, I know that they were like relying on Gator a lot, and then they ended up switching to Hawk when it wasn't working out. It's just kind of interesting to me because I feel like Hawk's hero pool has been pretty, or at least tank pool, has been pretty limited overall. So I wonder whether or not they go for another tank player going into next season. Cause I don't think Gator is really cutting it.
Yeah, I think this team as a whole just needs a bit of a whole revamp
Mm-hmm.
because it just wasn't working for a majority of the season. Yeah, they
Yeah.
were like they weren't the worst, but they weren't good
Yeah.
either.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of these players are also new or newer because I know Ultraviolet. Didn't he came from ISU, right?
Yeah. A lot of these
So I know.
players came from ISU or Redbird
Mm,
Esports, which is interesting because they're the whole logo is Redbird. But yeah.
that it's just I feel like they need more time to work out what they're doing. It just
Mhm.
I wasn't impressed.
Definitely. And I kind of have to wonder too whether or not this team is going to ever um adjust its coaching staff because ever since it started, it's had the exact same coaching. Well, it's had the exact same head coach. The assistant coaches around him have been different. But one thing that people always say about the Rain within, the people inside Owl, is that they're a very player run organization, right? They're not super disciplined. Sefi kind of has a good mind for the game, but he doesn't really set too many standards, which if you watch League of Legends, that's what kind of like the whole NA culture is, and NA is supremely bad in League of Legends. And I kind of have to wonder, the more we go into Overwatch over time, especially because even right now I feel like the swim culture in Overwatch is really rigid. How long does a team like Atlanta Rain really last? I think
Mhm.
they're being carried by their talent while the coaching staff needs to put more structure.
Yeah, honestly, I find it really odd that the coach has lasted as long as he has for a team
Mm-hmm.
that hasn't spit out like good quality gameplay. It's just there's a common variable that everybody knows what this common variable is, but
Mm-hmm.
somehow he's still on this team.
Yeah.
And you have to wonder what has to happen for this guy to get the boot
Yeah.
because it needs to happen. It's time for him to go.
Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah, because I think the only good result was last year when they made a grand finals. But I think a lot of that was because there was a meta shift towards the end of the year.
Hmm.
Um, and they made grand finals. They bombed out of grand finals, and then that's the only major title or I guess accolades they've had. They've never even gotten close to winning a mid-season tournament or anything like that. So it's strange because the talent is there, but it's just we know what that something is, but something is missing, right?
Yeah.
We know what it is, but apparently they don't.
Hmm.
All right. Now, the next team is one of my personal favorites because it's my birth town, but Toronto.
Uh,
Um,
Toronto.
yeah, Toronto. So Toronto, uh, is a very it's an organization that kind of feels like people forget about because I don't know what it is about this team, but they put out like decent content. They have decent branding, but something about the marketing for this team just doesn't work. But regardless, they actually did pretty well this season, right? Which, with the amount of talent that they invested in, definitely should have happened. But I feel like they could have gone even farther and just didn't.
Yeah, and I have to. I feel like this is a running theme with a lot of these teams
Mm-hmm.
that should be good in theory, but just don't end up just not. I have to wonder if it's because of the radical meta changes that come with Overwatch 2,
Mm-hmm.
especially with their beta version and how like I know the same comps are ran for like a month, 2 months, and you have to wonder they got really good at that one comp, and as soon as it's swapped to a completely different one, they just couldn't figure it out as fast as the other teams anymore.
Yeah, and I mean a lot of the teams that were in play-ins, they got really screwed over, right? Because play-ins was in the previous meta, or the previous patch, but then playoffs was completely different. And all these teams that got into playoffs, from the regular season, right? They had time to practice the new meta, but these play-in teams, I mean, they only had like 3 days or something. Um,
Yeah,
so those teams kind of got screwed over. I think Toronto had a decent performance overall, in terms of the season, but I mean, you're looking at it here, right? They win play-ins and then they lose 0-3 to Houston, which Houston was really strong, so can't really fault them there. But then they lose 2-3 to Spark, and that's actually pretty close. And Spark was a pretty strong team. So I have to wonder how much farther they could have gone if they just had a little bit more time to practice this new meta.
yeah, it was unfortunate how that happened to those play-in teams, and just have to hope that something like that doesn't happen again in the future.
Mm-hmm.
It was definitely not fair. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I don't think this team really needs to make any changes for next year. Honestly,
mm-mm.
I think the coaching staff, there was doubts in the beginning, but I think once they finalized which players to keep in and which players to kind of keep on the bench, rather than kind of swapping too much, they found their stride. And you know I think as long as they can improve upon whatever they did this past year, that works out, right? Chorong is an amazing flex support. Twilight, amazing flex support. Hisu and Aldo and Finale, like all amazing DPS. And both the tanks are great too. I think that this is a star-studded roster. Um, on paper they could be like a top three team, but I think it really just depends how far the coaching staff can take that team.
Yeah.
All right, so then I want to save Houston for later because they were one of the top three teams. Same thing with Dallas, but let's talk about Seoul. So
So
I think Seoul. So even though I didn't watch a lot of APAC, I was keeping up with Seoul a lot just because I'm a huge Jonak fan, and originally Jonak was gonna be on Seoul, but even then, not even then he wasn't. I still kept up with the team because I wanted to see how they did. And I think if it wasn't San Francisco Shock, a lot of people expected Seoul to be the other team to face Dallas in the finals.
hmm
So I don't know. I kind of want to get your thoughts on what you thought of this team overall, um, like just for this year.
well, I can tell you that they have a stacked roster.
Mm-hmm.
Like Prophet and Smurf are two of the best on their role.
Yeah.
Like I'm not that informed about the rest of them, but I know they're all very good.
Mm-hmm.
So I was almost a little disappointed that they didn't go farther because they definitely could have if they I don't know what they could have done differently, but that again I didn't really watch these guys much.
Yeah, and I
But
mean maybe some of it has to do with experience because
yeah,
they do have some veterans, but they've got newbies like Stalker and Bin Dime.
hmm
And then Toby, right? Toby is the head coach, but this is also his first year being a head coach. He's been a player for a long time, a legendary player, but he's moving into the head coach position for the very first time.
hmm
So maybe he's a little lacking on what exactly is needed in that position. Maybe going into next year, he learns a lot. I think he did a really good job with the roster overall. But I mean, this roster is just completely star-studded, right? You have Prophet, who, people like to debate whether or not he is the greatest of all time. In my eyes, He is simply because he's been the most consistently top level player in the entire league. Maybe he hasn't reached the peaks of other players, but I think he's been the one player in the league that's just been in it throughout and has been a top level performer the whole time. So I would say
Mm-hmm.
he is. Yeah. And we have, Smurf and Vindime too. I think a lot of people get very or a lot of people were very annoyed that these players were kind of robbed in the sense that so Vin Dime didn't get Roll Star, even though a lot of people thought he should have. And then Smurf, I don't know if you saw the MVP votings, but people were really annoyed that like all the DPS players got like somewhere between 13 to 17 votes, and then Smurf got like 4 for MVP, and like someone like Lip got placed higher than Smurf in terms of votes, even though Lip didn't have that amazing of a year. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I don't know. I guess we can talk about that too, though. Maybe we save that for after we talk about grand finals, but I guess the thoughts on the MVP awards and basically, is MVP a DPS competition at this point?
I mean, if we're doing that now, it pretty much is. Like, DPS most flashy role in the game,
Yeah,
and like a support. You think a support's ever really gonna get that? Nobody. It's
yeah,
always going like, and then tank. It's gonna be more flashy this year, but not as still, especially with like Sojourn in the game. It's never gonna be as like flashy as any kind of DPS is, which is unfortunate.
yeah, and you know, cause I think so in the past, right? We've had all DPS players except the very first year with Jonak that got the MVP, and Jonak got it one because of his flashy plays, but two, he was so impactful to the to how Zenyatta was played, or I guess how people played around a Zenyatta, that he basically like revolutionized flex support in that era, right? And so that's why he was so impactful and became MVP. And so you have to wonder, right? Like for DPS players, they just have to make flashy plays, but for any other role, they have to basically redefine their whole role in order to get MVP. And at this stage of the game, like how often does that happen, right?
Mhm. So yeah,
Um,
I feel like we there really shouldn't just be like one MVP anymore. I think it
mm,
should be MVP per role
right.
because what's the point of everybody knows it's going to be a DPS. It's just
Yeah.
that's not even a question.
Yeah, and I remember last year too. There were so many people that were like, Fearless should get MVP. Fearless was like the second person in the running after Leave, because people were like, oh yeah, Leave like he deserves MVP. But I mean, personally, in my opinion, Fearless was doing so insanely good to kind of take his team across the finish line, and that he was way more impactful than Leave. Like Leave was great, but I don't know. It just feels like at this point it's hard for a lot of people to gauge how, well, at least for casuals, it's hard to gauge like who's actually doing more impact. And when it comes to like the analysts too that are putting in these votes, I think too much of the impact is put on, basically getting the kills, which is totally fair. But at what
It's,
point,
it's like
do
everybody sees the kill, but
yeah.
what nobody sees is the setup for the kill or
Mm-hmm.
the support that keeps the kill streak going, or the tank that, or like when the ball slams an Ana, nobody sees the ball. Everybody sees the Tracer get the kill on the Ana, not the ball helping her out.
Right.
So that's just how I see it.
Yeah. Yeah. I just hope in the future that they kind of I like your idea where there's basically 3 MVPs, one for each role, but I also have to wonder for main support. Like I feel like main support is just never gonna end up getting an MVP because
That's true.
their impact is like extremely hard to gauge. And they almost never show up on broadcasts as like the player POV. So yeah,
Mm, that's just I don't know. But
yeah,
the way Overwatch is set up, I feel like MVP doesn't really work in my mind. But
hmm,
it is what it is, I guess.
yeah, yeah. All right, and then moving on to the last game of the playoffs before we go into the 3 finalists, we have the LA Gladiators, which I think a lot of people initially at the start of the season thought were going to be a strong contender for winning the whole league, but in the last like stage and a half, they fell off, and they didn't have a terrible playoff performance, but I think people expected more from them.
Yeah, it's a little disappointing that they got beat by London of all teams in the
Yeah,
second round.
yeah,
It's like that. I don't know. That's just a little disappointing on their part that they let that happen.
right.
And it wasn't even like 3-1 isn't very close. So
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't know what happened with that team. They should have gone farther,
Yeah,
especially with how good of a season they had this year. But then, yeah.
yeah, and I mean they did have a couple of their players leave in the middle of the season. So Ons left due to mental health reasons, and then Patty, or Patty fan, he ended up joining a Valorant team. So two players left in the middle of the season. Ons wasn't that impactful because he wasn't getting too much play time, but Patty definitely was. So I'm sure that was a big loss for them. But I
Mm-hmm.
mean, they also had Kevster, right, who's nuts DPS. Um, I kind of wonder though. So taking a look at the roster right now. Ons and Patty both left. Who was the second DPS? Wait, what?
Happy?
It was Happy. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Okay, I totally like brain fart at that because I'm looking at the roster on over.gg and I'm like, wait, these two what? Did they just put like space on DPS and just hope for the best? But no, you're right. It was Happy. I remember that because the whole Washington Justice ordeal. But yeah, no, I mean they've got a stacked roster. The coaching staff, um, I mean I don't really know what to say because this coaching staff is new considering that DP had left and went to Vancouver. Um, but I mean overall it seemed like the coaching staff did good, but wasn't really
Mm-hmm.
enough to push them over the edge.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a couple changed decisions and they could have gone farther in this tournament. It
Yeah,
just, I don't know, stuff happens. You,
yeah. I mean, I had to wonder like if Patty did stay, how far they can go because Patty was definitely impactful for them, and I know that like he had a wrist injury too. I don't know how much that really affected him because he said it didn't, but I feel like a game like Overwatch probably is pretty hard on the wrist, and Valorant
yeah,
not so much. So for him, Valorant's probably a more secure option overall. But I think the story for this team changes a lot if Patty does end up staying.
agreed.
All right. Now let's get into our finalists. So at number 3, we had Houston. Now personally, Houston overperformed my expectations by a lot. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I am a little bit of a Houston hater, but I had to give credit where credit is due. Where I think overall their season was decent, but this playoffs run, well, was pretty amazing.
Yeah, like, um, nobody expected them to get this far. We all knew that they were a pretty good team, but nobody was expecting them to beat the Shock in the second round.
Yeah, and that was a
And
close game
then,
too.
yeah, and then, well, then they beat London, but that was London.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then Shock ended up getting their revenge later on, but
hmm,
yeah, and then they lost to the champions, so
yeah. Well, they lost to they lost to Dallas in the upper bracket, and then they
yeah,
got eliminated by Shock.
hmm
Um, and then I think actually no, Spark did also take off a map, but I mean they took a map off Dallas, which I
they
guess
did.
is pretty impressive. Yeah. But I think the thing that's most impressive about this team to me is the fact that basically they got rid of their tank player like in the midseason, and then just put Dante on tank, and then you would expect like that brings me back to season 1 where like Ryu Jaehong and Taimu were just suddenly put on tank for no reason, but Dante actually like he did really well on tank. I was surprised because he was
hmm
performing like a top level tank player in many situations. I guess there were some instances, particularly on the Winston where he could have done better. But regardless, very good showing for him from
hmm
just switching to a new role.
Yeah, for a non-tank player playing just being put into that position out of nowhere,
Mm-hmm.
it was impressive. I'll give him that.
Yeah.
It's like tank is hard to play, especially if you don't ever play tank. Even for like the even for owl players, it's still like you can't just expect to switch roles one day and to do good. Yet Dante somehow did the unexpected and was like was a solid tank player. He was better than quite a few tanks in the league.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's kind of embarrassing for the other tanks where
It
it's
is.
like this guy who was just like DPS player all of his career is just outperforming you on tank for or all out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
I mean you respected Dante for that. So I don't know, it's also kind of funny that like this whole transition came about because Doom was like meta for a little bit of time, and I mean what do you call it? He was like the only Doom player before, so they just put him on Doom tank and then he just picked up tank as a whole. So
Mm,
I guess if anything good came out of the Doom like tank switch, I mean a lot of good came out of that, but particularly the fact that Dante switched to playing tank, I mean that was pretty sick.
it was.
Yeah, I don't know. I was really impressed by Merritt too. I didn't really know much about Merritt going into the season, but I think overall in this season, him particularly on the Sojourn was pretty nuts. I think he did well.
Yeah.
I think going to next year it's interesting though because from what we know, so I don't know whether or not they do pick up a new tank player.
Just keep Dante on
Yeah,
tank.
I mean maybe keep Dante on tank, but I guess it kind of depends on what Dante wants to do, because maybe he wants to stay on DPS, but he just picked it up because um the 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 franchise didn't want to pick up a new tank player. So I guess we'll see. But there's rumors of Lastro switching to Valorant, so unknown on what happens there for the main support. Um, and creative, I mean, creative is pretty good. Pelican is good. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I don't really know um, what this roster looks like going into next year. I don't know if they keep Piggy. Actually, I think they already dropped Piggy. This list might be updated that I'm showing on screen or outdated, shown on screen. But yeah, I mean, it's just weird because I feel like this roster, if it just had more time together, it would do really well. And if it just had a little more pieces around it, then it could be a finalist, or maybe even a winner, next year. But I don't see this roster sticking together, unfortunately.
Nah, it's seems like just like a shamble of players right now that
Yeah,
happen to do really well.
yeah,
It's just impressive, but not that's not how you build championship teams, unfortunately.
no, definitely, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll see. I'm anxious to see where this team goes next year. But I think that's the
Mhm.
case for a lot of the Overwatch League teams, which I guess we'll talk about this when we do the health check. But I guess going into next year, well, we'll have to see what the state of the league is like because the start of
Yeah,
the year,
like
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
we don't know.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Number two. So we had the San Francisco Shock. Um, I mean, I think it's kind of a no-brainer that they would make it this far. Some people probably expected them to make it even farther, but I don't know,
Hey,
like
they
Dallas, they
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 almost did.
yeah, they
Like
almost
it,
they
it
almost
was a
got
very close final match.
yeah, yeah. That was definitely the best grand finals that we had. So I guess before rather than talk about number two and number one, let's just talk about the grand finals overall, right? Let's just switch
Yeah.
to um the grand finals itself. So grand finals, Shock and Dallas went the full distance, 7 maps,
hmm
right? The first time that we've had a full 7 map grand finals, and it delivered.
hmm
It was
Every map could have gone either way,
yeah,
which was even better.
yeah. Every map was close, and then um, the last map, Coliseum, at the beginning it wasn't close, but then at the very end, there was a glimmer of hope for Shock, but in the end, Dallas ended up taking it, but it was an amazing match to watch regardless, and I'm really happy that that was the first grand finals for Overwatch 2.
hmm
I
And
think
like I think I would argue that if Push wasn't the final map, that Shock would have taken it. Personally,
you think so.
I think
Um,
so.
I had to take a look at uh
Because
the
if you know, like Shock lost both Push maps,
mhm.
and I have to wonder if they're just weaker on Push and better on payload because I can't. I think they won nearly every payload, both payload maps.
So let's see. Map one went to Dallas. Map two. So hybrid number one, which is Kings Row, went to Shock.
Mm-hmm.
Escort went to Shock. Push went to Dallas. Okay, so they for control they tied on control.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then 66 went to Dallas. So they tied on Escort as well. Um, so I guess it's interesting. Maybe yeah, I mean maybe there's a decent chance that if it was control they would have won because I know that Shock is the second best control team in the season after Houston. And Dallas winning Oasis was kind of a surprise to everyone overall because Shock has a decent win rate on Oasis.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it was a pretty big win for Dallas.
I was, and like I can't say I'm like a Shock fan, but
Mm-hmm.
I think funny enough, I originally started rooting for them back in season one because I like their colors the most because there's no Chicago team, so I'm like, well, how
Yeah,
do I pick? Well, I like this orange team. I'll pick them.
yeah.
Since then, I've just as quietly rooted for Shock. I don't because I don't have like a main team I really root for, but
Mm-hmm.
even though that they lost, I was happy to see a different team win. I always like that
Yeah,
personally.
yeah. No, I mean, for me, like in the beginning in season one, I was a Dallas fan, only because Siegel was on the roster, right? And then ever since he left, I had become a New York fan because of Jonak. But then over time, when Toronto got introduced, I was a big fan of Toronto too. So when Jonak was gone from New York, Toronto became my main team. Um, and so I've kind of closely I've kind of always liked Dallas, even though they had very questionable decisions, throughout their history. But I'm happy to see that this team did end up winning, finally getting a championship because the past 2 years the organization has showed that they're actually really committed to winning. Um, and the fact that they were rewarded with a grand finals victory was big, and not to mention, I mean, the fact that Fearless started off on Shanghai season one, right? 0-40, right? Started off as a DPS player too that swapped to tank. 0-40 went back into contenders because he was dedicated not to quit and to actually improve, and then did improve when it made it back into the Overwatch League and was just like a star player. That's a sick storyline, and so to
Hmm.
see it to come into fruition was really good.
Yeah, in my mind, Fearless is like the MVP because
Mm-hmm.
I feel like he deadlifted this team at certain points during these playoffs and the season overall.
Right.
It's just, yeah, the Sojourn player, he,
Uh,
I forget his
Edison.
name. Yes, he was also like amazing, but
Yeah.
still, as a tank player, I can't help but like the tanks the most. But
Yeah. And I
I
mean,
I feel I
sorry, go
feel
ahead.
like they would not have made it as far if they didn't have Fearless.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I know that Hanbin did really well, or had to play like in Zari meta and Jotes meta. Because more off tank type characters.
Yeah.
But I think overall, Fearless has kind of been like a presence on this team that has really pushed it forward, even when he hasn't been playing. Um, so I think that his impact has always been understated, and him winning Grand Finals MVP was like some really well deserved recognition to top off the Grand Finals win.
Yeah.
Now, going to next year, what do you say? Do they just run it back?
I mean, if they can afford to keep this roster as it is, I would keep it. But
Yeah.
that said, unlikely that's going to happen. That's just the nature of these things. Some of these players are going to want more money, can't afford them anymore, or maybe just go to a different team. So,
Yeah,
I mean, if I were them, I would keep as many as you can, but
I mean
if you're
Dallas
not,
is Dallas is also one of the more richer orgs in the organization, and
mm-hmm,
a lot of the teams right now um their financial situation is kind of up in the air. So I don't know. I think if these teams do want to leave, their options are very limited. Because they can really only go to other top level teams like San Francisco, like Seoul.
mm-hmm.
Um,
But like I know that there are teams that will pay a lot of money
oh
for
yeah,
people like Fearless or Edison or Sparkle,
Mm-hmm.
any of those players can. There'll be teams trying to get them. I can promise you that.
Yeah, but I think yeah, and I think a lot of these players for them, what kind of really matters, ends up mattering is like the coaching staff.
Hmm.
That for whichever team they end up on, because a lot of teams, a lot of these players came because Rush was the head coach. Um, but I mean, some of these players like they may be interested in going to Shock because Krusty is the coach there, right? Like, they think, hey, like I won a championship here. If I can make even more money and still be on an elite team with elite coaches, I may go do that. Um, so I guess we'll see. Do want this roster to run it back. Maybe I don't know. Chio, like people praise Chio, but I feel like I wish I saw a little bit more out of him. So if anything, maybe I would replace him on the roster. But I think if they run it back, it would be perfectly fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We'll have to see because a lot of decisions up in the air.
Yeah. Now, looking at a team that may need some improvement. Let's talk about Shock, right? Um, they had a pretty good season overall. They were really strong throughout the season. I know that they had a low point with Jotes, um, but even in the end, I think a lot of people were worried that they wouldn't make grand finals, but they did. They clutched it out. They almost won the whole thing, but fell short. Um, what do you think? Really, they were kind of lacking in, or what improvements do you think they can make in order to kind of take it all next season and maybe get the three-peat?
I mean, personally, I think their weakest spot is their tank lineup
Hmm. Okay.
because, well, I'm gonna use mainly the grand finals as an example because I didn't
Hmm.
watch every game.
Hmm.
But I don't know. I felt like Mikey was getting outplayed by Fearless at nearly every point.
Hmm.
Now that said, Fearless is a very like solid tank,
Hmm.
but like I don't know. I feel like I know for a fact Striker and Violet are both amazing at their role,
Hmm.
and so is
Proper.
Proper amazing on the Sojourn as well. So like all of these players are pretty good in their own right. It's just the other team was a little bit better than them this year in the
Yeah.
gra- I also feel like it would have helped them if they didn't lose in the first round to Houston. That
Yeah.
might have they wouldn't have had to play Fuel in the finals unless they made it all the way back. But I
Hmm.
feel like if they didn't lose there, they might have had a better chance.
Yeah. I think another thing too. So it's interesting to me because um, throughout their entire season and throughout the playoffs as well, um, Mikey was only playing on control maps, but then every other map, Kaluge was playing. But then for the grand finals, only Mikey played throughout the
Hmm.
whole series. And I have to wonder why. I think if I had to guess, it's probably because they maybe were expecting Dallas to prep for Kaluge, and they thought that okay, maybe keeping Mikey in, kind of ruins their prep or at least puts a dent in their plans. But in the end, overall Dallas still ended up taking it. So maybe that's it. But I don't know. I feel like at some point you have to wonder like, okay, if it's this close, maybe do we just put in Kalush and the team has that chemistry built on all the maps with him already, so might may as well play with that.
It almost looked like because they got up early that they
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to like lose momentum in the next maps, but then they started losing again. But then they were afraid
Mm-hmm.
to change anything because it worked originally. I don't know. It was weird that
Yeah,
they didn't swap that out, but I don't know what was going through that coach's mind. But
yeah. I think what's also interesting is the uh the fact that um they signed Striker like right before the playoffs, or at least like a couple of weeks before, because I thought Sam was doing pretty well. I know
mm-hmm.
that he struggled during Jodes, but they struggled overall. Because I know that someone was sick and couldn't play. I'm forgetting. I'm blanking on who exactly, but it. I feel like it's kind of sad to see Sam's career kind of pan out like that. I mean, I'm sure maybe they keep him from next year, but I feel like they could have just focused on improving him even more, um,
Mm-hmm.
and he would have reached those heights. Especially because how cool would it have been to seeing someone go from collegiate to Overwatch League champion, right?
Yeah,
Um,
and like my personal, I don't like it when teams sign players, especially like really good players that quit and or retired
mm,
right at the end just so they get that shot at the championship. I personally don't like that.
mm,
I find it a little cheap almost because
yep,
it just shows that you don't have confidence in your team, the team that you got you to these championships to win you this championship.
yep,
So I wonder if that also like hit their morale because that like if I was on that team, I would just go, oh, they don't think we can win, so they have to sign a new player. That
yeah,
like that's how I would take it.
yeah.
So
I don't know. I mean, I feel kind of bad for Sam. I'm hoping
yeah,
that next year, like he does, get, basically the playtime he deserves. Hold on. Sorry about that. But yeah. I mean, I hope he gets the playtime he deserves. Striker is a great player and all, but I don't really understand the signing. I felt like the player quality was already good, so I don't know.
hmm
I guess we'll see what they do with that next year. It's always strange because I don't know. Shock has like a weird DPS problem. They have this like every single year where they just like sign a DPS for like seemingly no reason, but I think it's like, but I'm guessing in Krusty's head. He's thinking of it as like a prospect, right? He's like, okay, I'm gonna sign this DPS and like develop them, so that I have another like piece to use going into next season. But this year was
yeah,
kind of
but
the opposite, right?
I just say Striker's not a prospect.
Yeah, because they signed Tayo before. They never ended up using Tayo, but like that's what they did with Tayo, right?
hmm
And I think they did that with someone else last year too. I can't really particularly remember. They did that with Architect way back, but like this year they just signed Striker. It's like, okay, why? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little. I don't understand that decision by them.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
especially if you think about it, like how long has it been since Striker has competitively played this game?
Yeah.
Since he was like they you expect them to compete at the same level? I don't know.
Yeah. All right. So now let's talk about basically what are our thoughts on this playoffs meta, right? So this basically we have wait, oops, sorry. Sorry. But basically we had you know, a mirror matchup the entire time, right? It was the exact same composition being played for the entirety of playoffs coming in with the the new patch that isn't on the live game but is in Overwatch League. Um, so we had Monkey, Reaper, Sojourn, Kiriko, and Lucio. What did you think of this meta in terms of both a gameplay and a viewer experience aspect?
Me, I found it boring, like super boring. In my mind, all this meta was wait till Sojourn to get a railgun pick and then go in. But that was their win condition for every team the entire playoffs was wait for Sojourn to get a kill. And I just find that boring, personally. I
Yeah.
wish I wish they played more than 5 heroes. Like there's what 30, almost 30 people on the roster,
Mhm.
and they just used only five.
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree. I think one of the basically one of like the most annoying things is the fact that we see another Reaper meta, right? I think Overwatch always has this, or Blizzard themselves always have this problem of not really like balancing the correct characters, or rather, not really rewarding like skillful gameplay. And so what happens
Mm-hmm.
is, wow, sorry, like I'm recovering from pneumonia, so like I'm coughing a lot. But basically, you know, you had a character like Genji, right? Genji probably a little overtuned, but I don't really think he deserves the nerfs as hard as they were, but he definitely did deserve some nerfs, right? But
Mm-hmm.
basically, what that resulted in was one, more of a reliance on Sojourn, I would say, and two, it kind of just put Reaper in the forefront, right? Because you have character like Kiriko, and I know that originally in scrims a lot of the teams were basically playing the exact same composition but with Tracer instead of Reaper. They swapped to Reaper because the one Reaper primary fire and that ult is kind of crazy. Like if you're playing tank, just turn off your monitor and just go play another game because you're not playing the game when Kiriko ult is up. And then but then also you have the ultimate within the Kiriko ult, right? Your Beyblade 2.0.
Mm-hmm.
And so you know we have Reaper in the meta. And personally for me, if Reaper is like the meta pick, that means that you've made a big mistake. When it comes to DPS because Reaper is like the lowest skill ceiling character you could play. The gameplay loop is so predictable and repetitive, and every player ends up doing the exact same thing on that character because it's not a very flexible character. It's not a very like fluid character.
Mm-hmm. And if we look at this on like an audience viewpoint, so like I don't like Sojourn, but she can be super exciting to watch. Reaper, on the other hand, is let me shoot monkey till he die and press Q every 2 fights. And if you've ever seen a POV of a Reaper, you can't see anything. Like
Yeah.
you, it's like watching goats when you POV a Reaper, and nobody liked that. And that's I don't know. I feel like Reaper is meant for the lower ranks in comp is his primary like purpose.
Yeah, and that really is what it should be, right? There's characters that should just be like niche picks in low elo. That's perfectly fine, but they should never ever be meta at the very top level, which I think happens way too much in Overwatch. Right? We've had multiple times where a character like Moira or Mercy is meta, which in my opinion they shouldn't be. Like same issue thing that happens in League of Legends. Like fucking Yumi is like a 100% ban rate of League of Legends. That shouldn't be the case, but that's a different game. My point is those low skill ceiling characters should, and at the pro level, there should never be a situation where those are preferred over a character like Ana or Zen or
Mm-hmm.
Bap or Lucio, right?
Like it should like the high skill characters should reward you for high skills,
Mm-hmm.
whereas the lower skills should just like yeah they're good, but like it shouldn't like tier the way it does. I feel with Reaper sometimes,
Yeah, yeah.
and honestly, this almost brings me to I know I'm curious. What are your thoughts on hero bans in this game
So
or hero pools?
I think, sorry, I think many years ago, I thought that hero bands were actually like a really good concept, right? Um, but essentially, like the issue that I come down to is that there isn't enough overlap in the game right now. So, for example, right, if you wanted to an alternative to Lucio, there is no alternative to Lucio, right? Someone bans
Mm-hmm.
Lucio, that that immediately gets rid of other compositions too, or other characters too, right? Like at the very top level, banning Lucio would be like banning Reinhardt, because at that point Reinhardt would just like he doesn't have an option to escape or he doesn't have any mobility, so you know
This is true.
yeah. So
I,
if in order for them to actually implement bans, there needs to be a massive addition to the roster where there's overlap, right? And I think tank has some overlap right now. DPS has some overlap. Support has almost no overlap.
mm-hmm. Cause like my thought is I will never support hero bans in like comp or just like the base game, but I feel like in Owl it could work because then
Right.
it won't be the same comp every game.
Mm-hmm.
It'll actually be mixed up and it'll be less about how well can your team run this one comp and more about how well can your team play as a team in more unexpected situations.
Yeah.
I feel like that would be a little bit more interesting to watch.
Yeah.
But I get what you're saying, how there's just not enough overlap between some of the characters.
Yeah. Um, I guess one of the questions that I want to ask as well, kind of going off of hero bands, um, how would you kind of envisioning them working with like hero swaps and non mirrors as well. Like, would you kind of want a situation where you can't run mirror comps in Overwatch? Like basically the two teams can't run the same characters. If one team is running one character, then they can't. Because one of the concerns of that is like, the Overwatch relies on switching within the game. Um, that like that would be kind of difficult to implement within this game. And also, I'm gonna step away for just a second, so I'm gonna leave you on that topic, but I'll still be listening.
All right, so I don't think that would work very well because, well, with Blizzard's history of banning character or buffing and nerfing characters, they have a tendency to super buff or super nerf certain characters. And I feel like whichever team happened to get that character first would just win the match. The way they'd have to do it is either, yeah, I just don't think it would work. Not it would be a mess personally.
Yeah, no, I would agree, and I think that's one of the concerns with hero bans too. Is like how do you implement it when you can do mirror matchups?
Hmm.
Because I think at that point, like some people are saying, like, okay, hero bans, like maybe we get rid of it to prevent these mirror matchups. But then what happens is that the same two teams run the exact same compositions, but they just run it with they just run it with that limited roster, right? So in the end, you still have mirror matchups. It's just a different mirror matchup than what you're usually,
Hmm.
seeing.
I almost wonder what if they did like hero bans in a way that each team gets to pick three characters, one from each role, and it changes every game. Every game it changes, and you can't like ban the same one two times in a row. I wonder if even something like that would work.
Hmm.
I because I'll be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of watching Owl just because it is just the same thing over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
If it was more, I would watch it more often, but it just isn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I feel like that would appeal to the more casuals than it does to the.
Yeah. No, and that's kind of something I want to cover as well. When we talk about Allen next year. Um. So I guess we can move on to that topic, right?
Mhm.
Uh, I guess so. Al going into 2023. Um. So this year right now has been a very interesting year. Considering that we didn't have Overwatch 2 at like the actual game in the hands of the players, or yeah, in the hands of the players for a majority of it, right? We only got it, I guess, for the playoffs. And we had the betas and stuff, but that wasn't really
Yeah, that doesn't really count.
yeah. So viewership was pretty low. Um, a lot of teams went super budget because of basically the state of the league. There were no sponsors for most of the league except at the very end. But then at the very end, when Overwatch 2 did come up, there was a massive uptick, right? So I think this Overwatch League Grand Finals was the highest, was the most viewed Overwatch League Grand Finals ever, even surpassing Season 1, which was very interesting.
Hmm.
Some of that was probably due to drops, but it's still interesting to kind of hear them, or kind of hear that, or kind of hear and see that it did so well.
Yeah, and like I feel like I don't think Owl should have started on Overwatch 2. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't a done. The game wasn't complete. They ran the same patch for half a season. They ran the same, and no new characters came out.
Mm-hmm.
And the game was just a buggy mess. And I feel like I almost feel like Owl like tried to like force Blizzard to do it, and they
Mm-hmm.
ended up paying for it in the end
Yeah.
because of just how the lack of like viewership this year.
Mm-hmm. So, so from what I understand, what had happened was, Blizzard and Overwatch League were kind of hesitant to go into it, but then the owners of the leagues were not happy with the trajectory of Owl from last year, and so when they heard that there was like a playable build coming up, they decided that basically the owners decided to pressure the Overwatch League into playing it on Overwatch 2 so that there would be an uptick in viewers. But that didn't really happen, right? Because the viewers don't care about a game they can't play.
Hmm.
That's just simply
And
the
like
case.
I truly, as somebody who played this game
Mm.
for 3 years with no content, I get what the owners wanted.
Right.
And honestly, this is Blizzard's fault for not releasing anything
Oh,
for a
definitely.
stupid amount of time.
Yeah.
They were kind of put in a corner because I think the viewership wouldn't have been much different even if it was on Overwatch 1 because
Mm-hmm.
nobody cared about the game anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a hard question because
No, and I think that's right. I think that kind of seeing how Overwatch 2 panned out, maybe it would have been worse if Overwatch 1 was in the season the whole time, like in this season, because like Overwatch 2 is out right now, right? Let's just say
mm-hmm.
if playoffs were in Overwatch 1 while Overwatch 2 was out, the viewership definitely would not have hit a new peak. Um, so it's kind of hard to say because they basically sacrificed their main season, in order for playoffs to kind of succeed. But you know, that main season they were just bleeding the whole time, right?
Yeah,
And so if you just stop the bleeding at the very end, that doesn't really save a
you
life.
still lost all that
Yeah,
blood.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and another problem too I have with the Overwatch League is it seems like Blizzard Blizzard and the Overwatch League itself does not understand like the purpose of esports, right? There's really like three main things. One, competition, two, the spectacle, and three, marketing, right?
Mm-hmm.
The thing that annoys me the most about Overwatch League is that they look at it as a way, like Blizzard looks at Overwatch League as a way to make money. But that should not be the case at all, right?
Yeah,
If you look at, I'm gonna use Riot Games as an example, even though like, what do you call it? Maybe they're too high of an example, right? Like it's not really a fair comparison because they're like an S tier esport, and Overwatch is not. But I want to talk about the way that the two developers like look at the esport, right? Riot looks at as League of Legends esports as a way to market the game, right? They're not looking to make money. In fact, they know that they're going to be losing money on esports itself. But in the long run, they're earning money because more people are invested into the game, even though they may or may not play it. They're still consuming side content. They're still consuming the TV show. Like Arcane did really well, right? They'll still buy skins even though they don't play the game. I do that even though I don't play the game. And so
mm-hmm.
like that's all that stuff is due to how well Riot kind of like markets the esport. They create all these spectacles with their music videos, with the world's openings, right? And then another thing too, Overwatch League has always been very monolithic, right? The teams themselves, they've always focused on like the team, right? As in like Dallas Fuel as an organization. They never focus on the individual. They never focus on like storylines, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
what happens is a lot of times they're always talking about like Overwatch League. It's like epic plays. It's like the pinnacle of Overwatch competition, which is cool and all, but people get drawn in by storylines. They get drawn in by individuals. And Overwatch League like has never ever prioritized that. And I'm hoping going into next year they do. Um just as an example, right? I'm gonna use League of Legends as an example again, just because Worlds was so crazy. But this year there was this. If you don't know, this year like, do you watch or keep up with League of Legends or no?
Not at all.
Okay, so just to give you an idea, right? There's an insane storyline this year where the two finalists were T1 and DRX, right? You may have heard of T1. That's the team with Faker, right? Three-time champion. Has been in grand finals 5 out of 10 years of his career. This was his fourth chance to, or this is the time where for him to get his fourth win, right? On the other side was DRX. The notable thing about DRX was that one of their players has been competing for 10 years. He's won every single title in the game other than a world championship, and he went to high school with Faker. So like, what do you call it? It just ended up that these two people that were high school classmates are facing each other in a world grand finals, right? And so what Riot did was that they built a storyline on basically this whole thing, right? And not to mention T1, their support player was actually DRX Def. That's the name of the player that was Faker's classmate. T1 support player was actually Def's teammate last year. And so Riot made this whole hype movie, 5 minutes long, talking about the history of Deft and Faker and then also included the history of the support player as well, right? And they played this right before grand finals, right? They had the opening ceremony with like Lil Nas X, what that song, whatever you think of it, it's still like a spectacle, right? But they had the
Mm-hmm.
whole opening ceremony with Lil Nas X, Jackie Wong, who's also like a really big name, and then the song from the call as well, and it's like this huge amazing concert thing, right? They basically right like I don't expect Overwatch League to do like a big concert, but the whole thing with that storyline that Riot did, right? Blizzard should have been doing that this year because they had a really good storyline to do that with. They had the Dallas storyline of Fearless, right? 0-40 in year one, went back to contenders, came back, was a god at the game, right? People thought he should have been MVP, but they just did not talk about whatsoever. And they were like, oh yeah, look, Dallas Fuel, right? Like, oh, like you look at this organization that's been in here for so long. They were like, what do you call it? Really hyped in season one, even though they were a completely different team. Like, no, stop. Don't talk about the organization, right? People do not care about the organization. Talk about the players, right? They're the things. They're the things that people get attached to. Nobody
Mm-hmm.
cares. Nobody cares that like, if Fearless was on another team, right? People would have been way more hyped about the other team. That's just how it is.
Yeah, and honestly, you know what I think would help?
Mm-hmm.
So I think they should bring back the World Cup.
Oh yeah.
Because you know why? You know what the World Cup did? All of those things you just talked about.
Yep. Yep.
And one, I think the World Cup was more exciting than Owl personally.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I don't know why they stopped it because I love the World Cup.
Yeah.
I thought it was so much fun. And that was
Yeah.
before I even like got into this game for real.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it would help for the marketing of the game, the marketing of the players, and the professional scene.
Right. And that's the thing too.
So
Like Overwatch has never been. It's weird because Overwatch League was originally said to be like, oh, it's a global league, right? Like you have these teams all over the world, players from all over the world. But then what ends up happening is, one, there aren't teams all over the world, right? Most of the teams are in North America. There's a couple of teams in Asia, and then there's like two. There's like two teams in
and then,
Europe, right?
and then there's London.
Yeah, yeah, and like not to mention, even in America, they're not getting every single region, right? Like the entirety of the Midwest is just left out.
Yeah,
And no South America, right? No Oceania, no Africa. So like, you're not a global league, and then not to
mm-mm.
mention, there's no like import rules or anything. There's only like 20 teams overall, um, and so it's kind of weird to me that Overwatch League always decided to focus on like the the basically the fucking monolith that is these individual city teams rather than like the players and try to promote players from other regions getting in as well. Like World Cup was a perfect example of that, right? Like if you saw a player from some like minor region, some country that doesn't have any players in Overwatch League pop off, and that player suddenly makes it into Overwatch League, like that's a sick storyline. That happened one year when we
Mm-hmm.
saw fusions from the UK, from go from World Cup to Overwatch League. Like that was a cool storyline. Even though his career didn't end up panning that much, it was still a cool storyline that got people invested. Um,
Yeah.
and I wish Overwatch did more of that because Overwatch is a great esport, but Overwatch League does not understand like basically the purpose of esports, in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I hope that's something they'll fix in the future, but I don't know. We're 4 years in now, and they have shown no signs of doing so. So,
Yep. Yeah.
well, we can only hope, I guess.
Yeah. Only so. All right. So let's move on to one of the bigger topics, the new hero Ramatra. Um,
Uh,
Now there wasn't really too much shown other than basically his backstory. But I don't know if you saw the pictures that kind of showed some of his
I did.
UI stuff. Yeah, so let's talk about that. Um,
Well,
yeah,
as a tank player, I'm excited.
yeah,
I think he looks like a lot of fun. I think the concept of a tank or even just a character with two modes that you can go
mhm,
between is sounds super fun and exciting. And it also sounds like it has a lot of applications gameplay wise for and a lot of different strats that could come out of this. Now, I don't know really like anything about these abilities, but from what I think they will do, I have high hopes.
I think like lore wise and design wise, they nailed it.
Oh yeah,
They hit it out of the
uh,
park. Yeah.
I was watching the YouTube video
Hmm.
for the origin story, and I love the comments were always like, "This reminds me of Professor X and Magneto in X-Men," and I'm like, "Wow, they're actually right. It really is."
Yeah. No,
It's like because between him and Zen, they have the same origin, or not the same. They
hmm.
started in the same spot, but they both want the same thing, yet are going two very different directions to get it.
Yeah, no, it's a sick storyline, and originally I was kind of disappointed that we weren't getting manga.
Mm-hmm.
But I think now, like thinking about it more, I am pretty excited, kind of like lore wise for this character. Gameplay wise too, I am excited, but I just don't know enough to like say how excited I truly am. And also I'm not really a tank player, so um, I'm still interested in playing him and seeing how he like impacts the game overall. But you know, no,
And
like
I also like the storyline of him being the leader of Talon. If I'm
yeah,
correct, this is the first Talon.
no, this is
No,
actually
it's not.
the third, yeah.
No, but like the first like okay, so Bap was Talon, was he not?
Sorry, Bap
Wasn't
was yeah,
Bap, and so was Sigma. But both of them were not like evil
evil.
characters. One
That's
of them
true.
didn't know what he was doing, and the other one thought that he was on the good side.
Yeah.
This guy is knowingly a like more evil character,
Hmm.
and I think that's exciting. I actually think this will play heavily into the single player,
Yeah.
just based off this origin story. I can see a lot of directions that they're going to go with him.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of interesting too, cause like going back to like the Zen dynamic, right? Cause apparently him and Zen consider each other brothers. And
Hmm.
it's also kind of interesting, cause like you know Zen tutored Genji, and Genji and Hanzo are brothers, and they're also like opposites, right? Like they had different opinions, but they were able to make up, right? So like there's also that parallel as well. So I'm interested to see how this plays out in the story as it goes for gameplay. The two forms thing is really cool to me. Obviously I can't really speak much until we know exactly what the abilities do, but I just kind of have to wonder like, um, we've never really had, I guess, a tank that's like so fluid in playstyle, like in the middle of a game or in the middle of a team fight.
Hmm.
And I had to wonder like what that means. In for like when this character is added, right? Let's just say this character is good. How people kind of adapt playing around that, because sometimes when a character comes out that's so fundamentally different from the rest of the cast, it changes like the overall skill level of the player base. So depending on how impactful this character is and how that's implemented, I'm interested to see like basically how the player base adapts to it.
Hmm. I was gonna say something. I can't remember what it was. Oh yeah, and we all know he's gonna be busted when he releases.
Oh yeah, yeah, and then not to mention like level 55 in the battle pass, and
Yeah, that's a whole
well,
nother story.
Overwatch One players don't get it for free. So yeah, that is something to see. Now they aren't doing a hero for season 3. The next hero will be for season 4. I kind of have to get your thoughts. Like, do you think it was a good idea for them to add another tank hero? Or do you think they should have added more support heroes to kind of help with queue times?
Well, I'm on two sides here. On one hand, as a tank player, I will never say no to more tanks. But on the other hand, my queue times are already super long, and it's only gonna get worse now.
Yeah.
And I get why they're doing it because there's a ton of DPS players, and we just had a support player, so I get it. I believe there was a rumor or something that the next two heroes are both supposed to be support. Don't quote me on that one,
Hmm.
and I'm pretty sure it is after Ramatra.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure it goes support, and then another tank. So we don't even get like another DPS till at least 2024,
Hmm.
if that's true.
I really hope that I mean, I want to see more supports because I am a support player, but also I want to see the play time or the queue times balance out. But um, one of the things that they brought up in the past was that they want to make more support characters like Mercy, and
Uh, uh, uh,
I really hope that doesn't mean what I think it means, because on one end it means like a support character that can focus on enabling one specific person. Sure, right? Like I don't really like that too much, but that's not terrible. But if it's like a low skill ceiling support, that's not what we need, right? Like there's
we,
already
we,
so many low skill ceiling supports.
we don't need more Mercy, Moira, or Brig players.
Yeah,
Like I I
that doesn't
I
get
ca-
more
I
people interested in the role.
it, it's just once again it just seems like they're playing for the lower ranks, even though
Mm,
they've said the other way around.
yeah,
I hope that's not what they're doing. Like I also don't know what that means. More supports like Mercy, that could mean many different things.
yeah,
Mercy is one, a single healer, two, a single damage dealer,
mm,
or three, a character that can res. Those are like three
yeah,
main traits, I guess.
yeah,
So I don't know like what they're gonna go with, how they're gonna go with that. But
yeah.
oh, the other thing is she doesn't require much aim. I actually think that's what they mean,
Maybe,
mainly.
but I really hope that's not the case.
I hope so as well.
Yeah, because I don't know. I mean, like we have Ana, Bap, and Zen now, which are good, but I feel like if you want to attract more people to support role, you need to basically make characters that could like be individualistic, have like flashy plays, but then also like you know provide utility to the team.
Mm.
And they need to add more of that rather than less.
Because I don't play support much, but my favorite support is without question Ana,
Right.
and which I actually find interesting because she's universally known as one of the most fun support players
Mm-hmm.
characters. I think you can like I assume that's what similar like what you've heard too.
Yeah.
Because and what's interesting is she's not like the most complex character. It's shoot teammates and has nade, and
Mm-hmm.
that's like it isn't. She doesn't have a lot to her, but yet even still, she's a lot of fun, and she's not like a low skill required player. It requires a sufficient amount of skill to get value out of her.
Right.
So I hope they have more. I think they should make more characters similar to that design.
No, I mean I definitely agree. I think that Ana is like the gold standard for supports.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe she's a little too strong at sometimes, but I think in terms of like the gameplay loop, that's what they should be going for.
Mm-hmm. Because I don't even know why it's so fun sleeping a target or
Yeah.
hitting a big nade. Like
Yeah.
it really shouldn't be, but I get a sufficient amount of enjoyment out of just those two things.
Yeah, and I think that's what support is lacking overall. Like support doesn't lack skill shots in general.
Mm-hmm.
Cause like even if like Moira, right, they keep her generally the same. But let's just say they remove the orb, the infamous skill orb with an actual skill shot ability. That just increases her quality by like an infinite amount. And they just need to add more of those. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so moving on to our last topic, let's just do like a quick health check on the game, right? So it's been over a month since the game came out. What are your thoughts on the game in its current state? What are your ideas, or rather, what do you think is going to happen in the future? Your concerns, your anticipations, or like stuff that you're excited for. Just let me know all of it.
All right. I have a lot to say on this topic because, on one hand, I think it's a great game. Gameplay wise, ton of a super fun game, especially coming from Overwatch 1. That being said, there are some glaring issues that need some addressing. So I think the first one I'm going to talk about is I don't know what they did to the ranking system in this game, but
Yeah,
it ain't right, and they need to fix that. Because I told you the story of how I went 7-12 with one left game, and I still ranked up, and I'm like, that doesn't make any sense.
yeah,
I definitely should not have ranked up there, but I did. And not only that, the amount of players that I'm getting placed in consistently high diamond or low masters games. Even though my rank is plat 3 right now, I believe. That's a little weird.
Yeah.
And not only that, the players in that are masters and diamond definitely should not be that rank, a lot of them. Because they're missing some fundamental understanding of the game that because like here, I'm gonna use an example. At the end of Overwatch 1, not many people were playing the game,
Mm-hmm.
but everybody knew that those that were left, they all knew these basic concepts, like the concept of dive or grouping up or I don't know, even just basic things like don't peek and reload, those kinds of things. They all knew these.
Mm-hmm.
Players today don't have a clue as to what I'm talking about when I say, let's try and dive the Ana in the back line. I do that as Monkey and I go in and feed and die because everybody's just hanging out in the choke for some reason. And yeah, basically, I can't play Monkey. I found that if I want to rank up, I have to play Sigma
Right.
because Sigma doesn't require team coordination to get a lot of value out of.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I've noticed a lot of new players are ranking up to Diamond extremely quickly, like concerningly quickly,
Yeah.
which is like a little bit weird.
No, they said that they did like a soft reset for players. Sorry, for players that like hadn't played in a while. But
Hmm.
something about that feels off to me because it feels like the players that have played in a while are ranking up or are ranking up faster. Like I see
Yeah,
people that are like season 3 top like or season 3 like masters and those players are like already back in masters and they play like fucking gold players.
yeah. It's like they don't. It's like they didn't touch. I don't think they touched the MMR at all.
Mm-hmm.
So they're getting ranked up extremely quickly, too fast that the MMR doesn't have enough time to accurately judge how good they really are.
Right.
And I don't know, I'm a little bit surprised that if they going to bother with the soft reset, that they only seem to have did it halfway.
Yeah. No, I mean
So,
I think there should have been a full reset for anyone that hadn't played in like at least 2 years because that's when the
or
last like
like
big update was.
if I feel like if they're gonna do this, they should have just done a full reset because I feel like that's what I'm playing right now is a full reset.
Yeah, but I think the issue becomes with full reset is they probably want to avoid a full reset and like at the start of Overwatch 2 because too many people will complain like, oh, why am I playing against a guy that was like top 500 in Overwatch 1 when I'm a silver, right? Like they want to
That's
avoid
true.
that situation. But I think overall, maybe it would have been better, like to have it. But I understand the situation that Blizzard is in, where they like don't want to alienate the new players by giving
Hmm.
them really hard ranked games.
Yeah.
On accident. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think ranked is in a really bad spot right now. I think one the people that play this game, there's something about them, man.
Yeah,
That I don't know what it is. They just always they live off talking shit about other people, whether it be the other team or their own team.
yeah,
Um,
it's yeah, the game hasn't been this toxic in a long time, I can tell you
yeah,
that.
yeah. And then the stuff we've talked about before, or just, just right now. Yeah, those are all issues too. I think the rank system itself definitely needs a revision. Um,
Hmm.
the
I
fact
feel like
that
it's super unrewarding.
no,
There's
definitely,
no, there's I feel there's no even in the game itself, there's no sense of progression whatsoever. I feel like it needs something besides the battle pass.
yeah. No, I mean that's the thing, right? Progression is definitely one part of it. I think the rank system is really demoralizing because you need 7 wins to finally see whether or not you go up or down. But then like you get that seventh win, and then you see yourself go down. It's like, oh great, I just deranked on a win, right? Like that feels terrible. And not to mention like you have no idea why you may have deranked. Like let's just say you do go like 7 and 5, right? Like why did I derank, right?
Hmm.
The game should tell you like, oh, like this is how you compared to your last like 7 games that you won, or like to the rest of the player base that's within your rank. Like these are your stats compared to them, like so on and so on. Right? There should at least be that.
Yeah.
Ideally, I would like the old system back, but That's
I
the
get
whole
why they
issue.
didn't do it,
Hmm.
but I feel like what I think they should do is do something similar to the hero unlock, where like I don't know, maybe you have to win like 200 ranked games, and you can see the
Mm.
actual number if you want. It can be like an advanced setting or something.
Yeah.
I because like I would like that. I like to see the number, but then again, I also grind the game, so.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I did notice, like the fact that I don't really see my SR. I don't like get, I'm not like very like, I don't min max my games anymore. Like, I don't care too much about losing, but in the end,
Mhm.
like the whole thing is like, I don't feel that rewarded for my seventh win. You know,
Yeah.
that's just the main issue.
Mhm.
And I don't really understand like what I need to do to get to that next step. Um,
I
moving on to
suppose
the,
the
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
next next topic, I suppose. What's your opinion of the current hero balances in the game?
Currently, I mean, we have that patch coming up. Um,
Hmm.
we've already saw a preview of that, but it, I'm
It
I'm
did.
really
It
worried. Sorry, go ahead.
it didn't fix it. The patch isn't addressing the biggest issue though, and we all
Yeah,
know what that is.
yeah, Sojourn, and like
Uh,
I don't understand because they're like, oh yeah, she doesn't have like a low pick rate and win rate, but one, I don't think that's true. As in like, what do you call it? I don't think people are picking Sojourn that much in low elo, but I think that, what do you call it? She will get a higher win rate over time, because people will learn that you just need to farm the tank and then fucking right click and you'll sometimes hit a shot on the
mhm.
squishy. Like people in low elo will just learn that really easily. And I
It's
think you're already starting to see that.
it's not even just that. Like, there's more to a character than its win rate.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I found it weird that that seems to be the only thing they're going off of.
And also, like, why does it matter? To me, it's like, if a character has a low pick rate in low elo, why does it matter if you balance them for high elo? Because it's not like that character is going to
Hmm.
have that pick rate go even lower, right? Like, if that character is already hard for low elo characters, if you nerf it for the high elo characters, the low elo people are not just going to be like, oh yeah, like I should play this character even less now. Like, what?
Yeah,
No.
it's it's odd. I, especially since they said, yeah, we're gonna be balancing top down this season, but then they
Hmm.
just go out and make that statement of, yeah, Soldier's fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with her, even
Yeah.
though Owl's only playing her, and the
Yeah.
top 500 leaderboard is only Soldier.
Yeah.
And the
No.
fact, and you know what the thing is, in the lower ranks, even though most players aren't good with her, when you do happen to get a player that is good with her, that player just takes over the game, and there's
Oh yeah.
nothing you can do about it.
No, definitely. I mean, I find it absolutely absurd that like Blizzard even does say that like they're balancing for higher ranks, because they haven't shown that, right? Like, one, if you are balancing for higher ranks, why is Genji being nerfed in the way he is? Because the
Hmm.
issue is never that the neutral is too OP, right? Because the higher you go, the more the more smarter you get about around playing around Genji's neutral, right? The issue is Nanoblade is like a win button, because what do you call it? Like, unless you have a support ult, you just lose, right?
Hmm.
Um,
And even then, it might
or a
not.
defensive
Sometimes it doesn't
support ult.
even matter.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, some of these Genji players are so good that they just go through trance. So like,
Hmm.
it doesn't matter. So like, why are you nerfing his neutral, right? When his ult, like, you're just making him more of an alt bot, you know?
I,
Um,
I feel
yeah,
yeah, like the easy solution to this is just don't let them get damaged, get like do extra damage in nano. They
yeah,
did that to Hanzo
yeah,
like years ago, but
yeah.
they don't have an issue with Genji one just taking or one shotting the whole team. Like it's a little
No,
odd.
it truly makes no sense. Like, they really should just be putting more power into the neutral, like it already was, and removing the power from the ultimate. Like,
Hmm.
that's really it. I don't understand what Blizzard's philosophy is there, and that's kind of like goes into the whole thing where I'm just concerned that Blizzard is just gonna end up making the same mistakes when it comes to balancing, because in Overwatch One we saw the same stuff. Like, Overwatch One, right? They one started balancing for lower elo. There were, but they also started designing heroes, for lower elo too. So like for example, dive was meta for a while, so they released Moira, right? So all these support players had Moira, but that wasn't a good design, and also it didn't solve the issue of dive because all these high elo players just knew how to, what do you call it? They just knew to wait for Moira's fade cooldown and still dive, right? So then they released Brig, and Brig just countered all of the dive characters, and also was not very hard to play. And so,
It
I'm
countered every hero you talk about.
yeah, that's true. That's true. Every hero, not just not just the dive heroes. Um, and so I'm worried that that philosophy is still in their mind, not to the extreme of Brig, but still like in some sense where they're like, okay, like we have this huge vocal minority of like these Moira players that play with their feet or something, and we should listen to them.
Hmm. It's and they've been doing it for years, and
Yeah.
somehow, and like, how often has this game just broke with metas that were like were a result of how they've balanced this game?
Yeah, I mean double shield.
Brig, Brig, Moira, double shield, goats. These are all a result of their poor balance choices, specifically
Yeah.
for the lower ranks.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh no, we don't know how to get rid of these metas.
Not to mention the balance cycle itself. Like Overwatch has never had a good balance cycle. Even in the past when they had like hero pools, they're like, yeah, like in order for hero pools to work, we need to have aggressive balance cycles. And so we promised to do that, and then they didn't do that. The balance cycle was still the exact same. And then in this game, they're like, yeah, like we're gonna do one mid-season patch, and then we're gonna do one, what do you call it, patch for like the new season, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I what do you call it? I saw like a lot of people on Reddit like agreeing with that philosophy because they're like, oh, it takes time for metas to develop. But in my opinion, I feel like within a season you can have like two patches that are very minor, but like
Mm-hmm.
work on fix the overtuned characters such as Sojourn. And then like you have the big patch that like completely changes the meta at the start of every single season. So you have like basically three patches in the season. Um, so I feel like that's how they could do it, but for some reason they're just doing like mid-season patch that doesn't seem to challenge all the main
Mm-hmm.
issues, and then the main season patch.
I also think one of my biggest concerns is I I I really hope this doesn't happen, but the end of the season patch, when the new season 2 comes out, season 2 patch,
Mm-hmm.
I have this concern that whatever they're going to do
Is it
like
enough?
isn't going to
Yeah,
change the meta whatsoever,
that's
and
like,
we're still going to be stuck on Zarya and Monkey.
yep.
And like my fear is because this is what's happened in the past.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean
And
that. No, sorry. Go ahead.
now go ahead.
No, I'm gonna say like that's exactly my concern too, because I don't want there to be a situation where they're like, all right, we heard you. We're nerfing Sojourn, okay? And then like the only nerf to Sojourn they give is like, now
She doesn't
she,
jump as high.
yeah, she doesn't jump as high, or like they increase the cooldown on the shit. I'm like, no, no. And then like we have to wait like until the mid-season patch for them to look at her again, and then like they're like, all right, this time we're nerfing the E, not the railgun. And it's like, okay, man, like please just like remove this character or something. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my concern as well. Now what do you think about the monetization? Because we've seen the Halloween event, and there's like a lot of concerns that people have had, and I think rightly
I
so.
I think this is a very they are doing it extremely poorly.
Yeah.
Clearly, not a single person on their team has ever taken a like economics class
Yeah.
because okay, one, it's like nobody understands that. Yeah, skins that cost more money. Yeah, maybe that might get you more money. Or how about instead skins that cost less money so that more people buy it
Yep.
and you actually make more money because more people buy the cheaper skins. Like
Exactly.
it seems like none of them understand that, and I know understand that from one economics class I took 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And not
Not.
oh,
Go.
go ahead.
No, I was gonna say not to mention like the skins right now aren't even priced according to their quality. So like
No.
For example, in the battle pass, you get the Genji skin, which is like a mythic skin, right? It's $10, but you have to grind for it. Okay, but then for Halloween, they released this Kiriko skin. That's just like a regular legendary skin, right? For $26. Why is that almost 3 times the price of the mythic skin? You know, like if you're gonna charge $26 for a skin, it should be a mythic skin, or it should be even better than what you get from the battle pass. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like if you want to send those that if you want to sell skins that are like that Kiriko skin, or like there was that Zen skin and Roadhog skin too for $20, like those should be like $8 to $10. You know,
At
at
most.
max.
Like
Yeah, at max.
I can tell you, I haven't spent any money on this game yet. I'm not sure if I will, and if I do, the only thing I will ever buy would be the battle pass.
Yep.
Actually, I probably will have to next season, but we'll get to that in a minute. But
Oh yeah.
the average player is not going to buy any of this stuff. Like, I'm sorry, a highlight intro is not worth $8. It's
Yeah.
just not for something that you see once every like 12 games.
Yeah. And like the charms are like $10. Like
Hmm.
that that's nuts. Well, then not to mention too, like one of the things that you had brought up is that there's no point of progress, or there's no sense of progression. Like one of the things is, if a free to play player is going to be invested for two different things. One, if they're really competitive about the game, right? Or two, if they have stuff to earn, right?
Hmm.
And then that free to play player may like invest even more, depending on if they see something that's really cool. Um, like if they don't want to buy the cheap skins, but they only want to buy the big premium skins, right? Like you need to keep those players hooked in. But right now, like you can't earn anything for free, right? In the battle pass, anything that is free is straight garbage.
Yeah,
And
you get
then
sub tier epic skins that you
yeah,
nobody wants
yeah, exactly. And
for
well,
characters you don't play.
even then, like you don't actually get any character skins in the battle pass. Well, for free.
Uh, yeah, you do. You
Oh,
get
you do?
some.
Which ones?
You get a monkey skin and you get a cat. You get a monkey legendary skin. That's just a reskin of an old legendary skin. And then you get an epic Cassidy skin. That's also just a
Oh,
reskin.
yeah. Okay.
I
Um,
think I think that's it.
right. No, but then what they should be doing, right? Like let's just for this Halloween event, for example, right? Like in Overwatch One, they had like the weekly challenges where you win 9 games in a week, and then you get a skin, even though it's like not an amazing skin, you get a skin, right? Those
Hmm.
events, like Halloween events, are like the perfect time to have like an event battle pass. Like other games do this, right? Like Fortnite does this, Valorant does this. Like an event comes like Halloween, you have an event battle pass. The free to play players can unlock something that isn't as good as the paid stuff, but it's still something that's enticing that keeps
Hmm.
them interested in the game, right? But right now, if you're a free to play player, you're basically told, "Hey, you're not spending money on this game. Fuck you." Like what?
Hmm.
Like
And
there
like
needs to be some incentive. Yeah, go ahead.
it doesn't even need to be like a battle pass. I think the challenges from last year, what was it? You had to like get
Yeah,
27 stars. I think those were great.
exactly.
People that didn't play this game very often played the game just to get the skin,
Yeah.
and it got players engaged. It didn't. Yeah, the skin wasn't great, but that honestly, they didn't even matter
Mm-hmm.
because people would do it anyway.
Exactly.
It's like if you give up one, maybe two skins per event, like come on, it's do that. How cheap can you guys be?
Yeah. No, definitely. And I mean, there was a whole fiasco too, where like the Kiriko skin, they were like, oh yeah, like each of these items individually would be this much, but we're selling you the bundle for this much. But then turns out you can't even buy the items individually. They changed that now because apparently that broke some laws in Australia. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
You know, I'm gonna move this on to heroes locked in the battle pass.
yep.
This is why I might have to buy it next season because it's a tank. And
See,
well, one, I have a question for you. So they're doing it to get people to buy the battle pass as its like flagship item and
right.
whatnot. That and whatever the mythic skin is that nobody wants.
Hmm.
What are they gonna do in the seasons that there isn't a skin, or sorry, isn't a character that is supposed to be like a map, like it's a map season?
Yeah.
So season three, I'm pretty sure is a map season.
I
All right,
mean,
what's your incentive? Why are people gonna buy it this season?
I think what I would expect them, or at least a smart thing for them to do, is a myth, like a second mythic skin. Um,
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would expect.
But that's not even close to like the
A new
like
hero.
the what people would want the hero. It doesn't even
Yeah.
have like the same
Like
effect.
now,
Not
it's
even
not like
close.
novel. Yeah, it's not. There's no novelty in it. It's just.
Hmm.
But like I think okay, when it comes to unlocking hero in the battle pass in general, like the thing that bothers me, there's two things. One, right? One is at level 55. That's way too late.
Yeah.
Two, um, I don't understand why. Okay, so I think it's completely fair in a free to play game that Blizzard like makes you unlock the heroes, quote unquote, right?
Hmm.
What I don't like is the fact that the only way to unlock them is specifically through the battle pass. And what I mean is, right, if you look at some other games, what they do, so I'm gonna use Apex Legends for example, right? In Apex Legends, you can earn there's a specific currency that's related to buying characters, right?
Hmm.
In the battle pass, you don't earn any currency whatsoever. You don't earn in Overwatch. You don't earn currency to get skins, right? Like the Overwatch coins or whatever they call them, like the non-premium currency. You don't get those in the battle pass, right? And you don't get premium skins, so you can't re-buy the battle pass after buying one battle pass like you can in other games, right? But there should be some currency in the battle pass that you use to buy heroes. So essentially, what happens is it accumulates so that every single battle pass you don't need to grind the battle pass or buy the battle pass to get the character. Basically, if you buy one battle pass, if you buy like let's just say you buy one battle pass, right?
Hmm.
That gets you enough to buy one character, and then you buy the second, then that gets you one to buy another. But then let's just say you have enough left over to buy the next two, right? So then players would be incentivized to buy maybe a couple of battle passes and not all of them. But right now, what's going to happen is one, the hero's locked in comp anyway, for the first 2 weeks. So
Hmm.
most players are not going to care. As in, they're not going to buy the battle pass. They're just going to grind the 55 levels. They're not going to pay for the battle pass. So there's no reason for like those players to purchase it. Um, and so like at that point, Blizzard is losing out on money. If they make it so that you can buy, if you get currency to unlock characters within the battle pass, more people will buy it. Maybe they won't buy it every single season, but you have more people buying it overall than like seasons here and there, um, to kind of make up for it.
Yeah. And you know what my question is? What are they going to do at the end of the season for those that didn't unlock the character?
Yeah, yeah. Wait,
Because you know they ain't giving it for free. They're going to have to pay for it somehow.
yeah. I'm guessing what's gonna happen is it's gonna show up at the shop as like $5 or whatever.
Mhm. And then we're gonna have the situation that we've never had in Overwatch 2 of, oh, the busted characters locked behind a payroll.
Yeah,
Oh, the other team's playing it. Oh wait, I can't play it because I don't want to spend $5 on this character.
yeah,
$5, who am I kidding? The skins are 20, $30 for this character.
right.
And my opinion is I don't think they should ever lock characters behind the battle pass.
Uh,
And not to mention, level 55. So I played this game a lot,
mhm.
and it took me at least 3 weeks to get to that tier.
Yeah,
That's too long.
yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, it's too long.
And
Like the amount of players that aren't going to get this character at all is because they don't have the time to put in 30 hours a 30 hours a week. Like it's I don't know. I don't like it.
the annoying thing too is they're saying that like, oh yeah, like one of the benefits is that now you won't have these people like locking in the character right away. Those people will have to actually learn the character before doing it. But like, the character's locked in ranked for 2 weeks anyway, right?
Yeah.
Like, what difference does it make?
What do you mean learn the character for? You can't even play the
Yeah,
character. It doesn't
exactly,
make any sense.
exactly.
What are they gonna do? Launch a
Yeah,
custom game against bots? Please, nobody's gonna do that.
yeah. Well, no, I mean their logic is like if you're free to play, like all the people that paid for it, like you have time to earn it before people learn it or whatever. But again, that doesn't matter because it's locked in ranked anyway.
Hmm.
But yeah, I don't know. I think I'm really the game, like you mentioned, the game itself is great. Like as like a gameplay, just scoping it into the gameplay experience, it's fine. The main issue is the game systems and the monetization systems. That is like the main issue, and like the main thing I'm concerned about because if they don't fix it by season 3, like season 2 is they can give some leeway because there's still a lot of lessons to be learned. But if they don't fix a lot of the issues by season 3, I I'm very worried about like
Mm-hmm.
this game going into next year.
Yeah. The other thing is, one of the other things I wanted to bring up is, why are they locking maps? Like, there
Oh
are
yeah,
like a number of maps that you can't play for whatever reason in quick play or comp or even arcade, and you have to wonder like, why did they lock Numbani and
negative
Rialto,
amounts of
Havana,
map.
and Blizzard World?
Yeah. Okay. So
Like, and you can't tell me that Havana's not ready. You want to know why? How I know that is because Havana was one of the like showcase maps when they first released stuff about Overwatch 2, and they had like owl teams play it.
yeah.
So Havana's definitely done,
Hmm.
but it's locked, and that doesn't make much sense to
You
me.
could even play Nomani in Overwatch 2 when it first came out in like
Hmm.
custom games, but then they
You
got
can
rid of
play.
it.
You can actually play them. You can play them all in custom games,
Oh really?
except for there is one 2CP map that you can't, and I think it's Temple. You cannot play Temple of Anubis for whatever reason, but all the other
Oh.
ones you can.
So I know that they announced that they're doing map pools, which I think is not a good idea at all.
There's not
Um,
enough maps in this game to do that.
yeah, there's not enough maps, but then also it like if you're talking about the first season of Overwatch 2, it gives the impression that there's negative amounts of content, which it feels like there
Hmm.
is. But uh,
Like the only thing
yeah,
is they haven't removed like any of the good maps, but the moment they remove like I don't know Kings Row, Lee
mhm,
Jang Tower, it's going to be a noticeable miss. It's
yeah,
noticeable that it's missing.
yeah,
I don't care about any of the missing maps. I didn't like them that much, but I still noticed them.
yeah. I mean, I like Rialto, but I hated Namani, so
Mm,
and Havana, I didn't really like Havana either. But yeah, I mean, I think that all the maps should be in there the whole time. Like to me, in a game like Overwatch, where the maps actually don't really impact too much because most people will just end up playing whatever they want anyway. Um,
hmm.
a map pool does not really matter. Um, like if you're talking about a tactical shooter, then maybe like you have map pools for there's reasons, but in Overwatch it makes no sense whatsoever. I don't
Yeah,
think that it fits in Overwatch. Yeah.
and the other thing was is the 2CP maps.
Hmm.
There are 5 maps just sitting there
Yep.
with no purpose, and I would like to see them again. Not
So
as 2CP, as
mhm.
anything else.
I mean, they said that there's 2 new game modes coming out, or
Two,
like that they have in the works. So maybe the 2 CP maps will be reused for one of them.
hopefully.
I
I
mean, one of
guess
the
3CP.
yeah, one of the so in the original Overwatch 2 reveal trailer, like the very first one from 2019 or whatever, there was actually a new 2 CP map in there. Um, it was like in Sweden or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, so that was actually a map exclusively for Overwatch 2 that was 2 CP, and I'm sure that map they did just scrap that map. So I'm assuming um that the 2 CP maps were repurposed for a new game mode in one way or another. Maybe they added even more to the maps, but yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah, we'll have to see.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that really covers all the topics for today. Overwatch League isn't going to be going on for a while, but season 2 is going to be coming out, so we'll probably have another show for season 2 in December. Um, but hopefully everyone enjoyed. It was great having you on the show, Aiden. I think this was a really good discussion. Um, and I hope that you enjoyed it as well. But yeah, I mean, interested to see what comes out of this game and what comes out of Overwatch League.
Hmm. I'm just happy to be here.
All right. All right. Well, thank you again, everyone, for watching, and have a great night.
Good night, everyone.